What is something your parents said to you that may have not been a big deal, but they will never know how much it affected you? Part 2. I'm adopted. When I misbehaved as a child, my parents would tell me that they were going to return me and get a refund. That's funny. My mom fled El Salvador because of the political turmoil. Whenever I was bad, she told me she would send me to El Salvador to work in the coffee bean farm with my cousins. Your life is like a bus. People will get on, people will get off. Some people will stay on forever. Other people will be there for a short time and then leave. And sometimes you just need to kick someone off your bus. On the subject of jobs, just remember, you don't have to be a farmer to be outstanding in your field. Guess which parent it was? One of my professors liked to say, if you want to be outstanding in your field, you have to spend time out standing in a field. When I was small, my mom and I would read together every night before bed. One night when I was maybe 5, we read a new book, I'll Love You Forever. It's written from the mom's point of view as her kid grows up and does exasperating things. Ruins her favorite watch, stays out late with friends, etc. Each time, the mom says, I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. The last page is written from the adult son's point of view, as he gently takes care of his senior mother. And he says the same thing his mom always said, but says mommy instead of baby. My mom cried reading it to me, and I didn't understand why until I got older and realized she was imagining all the stages of life she would go through with me and my brothers. I'm an adult now, and thinking of it still makes me teary-eyed. I've never gotten through that book without bawling. Ever. Same. It always made my daughter hug me and say, "Don't be sad, Mommy." It was hard to explain to a small child that I wasn't crying out of sadness. Stopped reading that book. Instead would read her favorite, Skippy John Jones. My mother-in-law and I were having a normal conversation, and she said this casually. My son never used to smile in pictures, and now he does. You make my son smile. And then she moved on to the next thing. I think it was the highest compliment she could ever give me. When I was pretty young, my mom once told me, never feel embarrassed about asking for a ride home, in regard to not being sober enough to drive. Years later, I'm leaving a friend's house and I make it about 1 block before I can literally hear my mom's voice in my head as I'm driving, and thinking to myself, man, I don't want to call my boyfriend to come get me after I told him I wouldn't need a ride. Immediately pulled over and called him. 10 out of 10 would do it again. I remember doing this once too, but because of my brother's advice. He sent me a card with cab money my first week at college, asking me to never drink and drive, and that he'd refill that money anytime I needed more. One night we went out and my car was at my friend's house, got dropped off and drove around the cul-de-sac, and realized I had no business driving, especially 20 minutes across town. So I stopped and turned the car off and got in the back seat and slept there till the morning. I realized I probably still could have received a DUI. Isn't there laws about sleeping in a car drunk and still getting one? But it was easily the best decision I could make at the time. I'm convinced that night would have turned out much worse if I would have tried to drive home. My mother died of cancer when I was about 12. She had fought for a long time and finally reached the point where we had come to terms that she was going to die. She was supposed to go into hospice care, so I didn't know that when I visited her in the hospital, it would be the last time I would talk to her. The last thing she said to me was when I was getting a haircut. I spent the night at a close family friend's house that night. My friend's father woke me up late at night and told me my mom had passed. He and my father were both there when she passed. He said she had him promise that he would look after me and my father. Her final words were, "Tell my father and me, I will always love them." It really impacted me. My mother was in pain, dying of cancer, and she spent her last moments worried about my father and me. Since then, I've tried to live that selflessness out in my own life. I try to make her proud every day. My mother's last words before dying of cancer was to my father, just as she went under before a desperate surgery to deal with side effects of the cancer she'd been battling for a couple of years, "Run with the boys." All of her children were adults. I think she meant to stay active and involved in our lives. It's a cherished sentence I'll never forget. Only way to double your money every time at a casino? Fold it in half and put it in your pocket. The only way to make money at a casino is to work there. My uncle to me when I was a kid. Don't compare yourself to your sister. You two are both amazing in your own right. I struggled with living in the shadow of my sister's academic prowess. All the teachers knew who she was and expected me to be the carbon copy of her. I put so much pressure on myself to be just as good, and my mom saw me struggling and said this to me one day. It took a while, but I finally realized that I am my own person with qualities that are unique to me and make me a good person. My older sister was always beautiful. Head cheerleader, lots of friends. When she went away to college, people would stop me in the grocery store to ask about her and tell me how gorgeous she was. It made me hate myself. A few years ago, when I was 25 or so, it finally occurred to me that maybe my sister had been jealous of me too. I was the smart one. Nobody even ever bothered to ask her what she thought about anything. So one night we got drunk, and I asked her if she ever felt bad because I was the smart one, and she answered, "Of course! Everyone was always going on about how bright you were. It made me crazy." Dad scolded me until I was in tears for buying an expensive watch. Around $3. I was probably 11. My parents took the opposite approach. I saved and bought an $80 Lego set. My parents thought I was nuts, but it was money that I had earned, and I knew what I wanted, so they let me get it. I came home, put the set together as quickly as I could, stared at it, and cried. That was not worth $80. Lesson learned. Great parents. Whenever I want to buy something online, I put it in my cart and then sleep over it in the night. I give it a day to settle down, and the next day I don't end up buying it at all. The impulse to shop is blunted if you think about it and give it some time. When I was like 4 years old, my mom told me that if you don't pull out a splinter, it travels in and pierces your organs and you die. Whenever I went near a splintery wood, I got terrified I was going to get a splinter and not find out until my organs explode. Right about when my hormones started kicking in at age 11, I started crying because my mom told me the splinter in my finger might get loose and travel to my brain. I wasn't upset over that fear, but rather that my mom could be so insensitive about such a dire situation and let me go to bed with this in my finger. Hormones are, so weird. You told me you wanted a cookie. When I was about 15, my mother went to Tim Hortons and I gave her some change and asked her to bring me back a bagel. She brought back a cookie instead and told me that's what I said to get. I locked myself in my room and cried harder than I think I've ever cried before in my life. Because the day before it was, I didn't scream and swear at you earlier. I have no idea what you're talking about. The week before it was, I have never hit you, but if you're so convinced it happened, let's just call CPS and have them take you away to a foster family who will beat you for real. The week before that it was, I didn't push you down the stairs. I barely even tapped you and then you just fell, etc., etc., etc. At this point, it had been about 4 years of her flying into rages and then trying to convince me it never happened. The cookie broke me. The fact that she still felt the need to lie and pin the blame on me even over something as inconsequential as getting my order wrong was just too much for me to handle. I still get upset thinking about it. Yeah, obviously, all the serious stuff was terrible, but the fact that she couldn't just admit to something as minor as getting me the wrong snack, that's messed up on a whole other level. In my eyes, at least. This is called gaslighting, and it's a serious form of emotional abuse. Are you out of her house now? Something my dad told me that's always stuck with me. Once we were driving to pick up my stepmom. I was around 11 or 12. For reference, my dad used to be a bank manager before he retired. He told me about a customer he had a few years back that had immigrated to Canada, and after working several different jobs, he decided he wanted to open his own business. Now, according to my dad, this guy's credit wasn't super stellar, but it wasn't awful, but his business idea was considered high risk. My dad told the man the bank couldn't give him a loan, and the guy were distraught. He begged and pleaded, swearing up and down he would be successful and pay back the money. Now, this was back before everything was done with computers and your loan was actually accepted or denied by a person. So my dad told the man he'd do what he could. A couple days later, my dad called the man and told him he approved the loan and the man was ecstatic. Fast forward a few years, and the man's business is booming, as well as several others he started up. He's one of the bank's best customers. After telling me the story, he pulls the car over and looks me in the eyes and says, I approved that man because I saw something in him. He had what you call good character, and having good character is more important than money. Some people are also really good at exploiting people by being great at pretending to have great character. Definitely a fine art to be able to pick up genuine good character. My mother said something to me when we were getting her passport renewed. This was in June 2016. The option was for a 5 or a 10-year renewal. I checked off 10 years, and she just chuckled and told me not to waste my money. I asked her why. She said, "I'm 77 years old." She passed away 4 months later. My mother was debating whether to get a brand new car or a second-hand one. I said to her, "It's probably going to be the last car you get, so it should be brand new so you can enjoy it and rely on it." She's 71, but still, pretty stupid of me to needlessly remind her of her mortality. Kick self. Never underestimate how much a dollar can buy, so be careful with your money. I'm now the type of person Frugal Jerk makes fun of. I had a dream where someone said that coins are not real money, and I can spend them on coffee without feeling shame. Grew up in a violent, abusive family. Dad was an alcoholic and beat mom. Mom, in turn, emotionally and physically beat us. I was constantly compared to my cousin, who was prettier and smarter than me, and who hit puberty first, so she was womanlier while I stayed an awkward tomboy. I was 8 years old, and I walked into my mother screaming, "Call the police! Help!" I ran upstairs and my mother was screaming, "He tried to strangle me, verbally abusive cat, call the police!" While my dad screamed, "Don't listen to her, she tried to hit me in the head." I was extremely confused and just burst into tears. When my dad stormed out to go to the pub, my mom looked at me in disgust and spat, "Your cousin would have called the police on him. I wish she was my daughter instead." It's probably one of the most hurtful things anyone has ever said to me. It absolutely disgusts me that anyone would treat their children like that. I'm so sorry we're raised by those monsters. I hope you're doing better now. Thank you, I am. I was kicked out at 18, and although it was one of the worst times of my life, it was honestly the best thing that could have happened to me. Honestly, my life is good, and I save a lot of money on Christmases and for Mother's and Father's Day too.